On today's World Insight with Tian Wei, we hear from environmental champions who have made global impacts, no matter their age or profession.
And there needs to be a will from the people to change as well.
And while China has its fair share of environmental challenges, we discuss China's pivotal role in halting the global pollution crisis.
Hello and welcome to World Insight with me, Tian Wei. The program is coming to you on CGTN. As the world is gripped by the heat waves from India to Europe to China, the effects of global warming are becoming ever more of concern. And that was a major topic at the just concluded Summer Davos and G20 summit. China is not resting, but rather actively tackling the pollution crisis. Shanghai, for example, now boasts a mandatory household garbage sorting system. Shanghai's enormous size also demonstrates that no city has an excuse for slacking on trash sorting. Indeed, Beijing has just announced that they will follow suit. How else will China set an example in doing green? We're going to talk about those issues today. So today we bring you bright minds from around the world who have devised their own ingenious ways to tackle environmental challenges. From mathematic speakers to policymakers to storytellers, they use their voices to fight for change. First, we hear from a young Indonesian girl with a giant footprint in protecting the planet. Isabel, her name. The organization she founded, Bye Bye Plastic Bags. The teenager was first motivated by watching a diver swim through the Bali seas filled with plastic and not fish. She and her little sister spread awareness by massive beach cleanup campaigns. During their endeavor, they spent 100 nights making speeches that even reached the United Nations. Eventually, Bye Bye Plastic Bags has already compelled Bali to ban all single-use plastics by the year 2019. The organization has gone global with 28 locations around the world, and Isabel proves that not only do things come in big packages, but rather sometimes they could also come in plastic-free format. You are doing an impressive campaign against plastic bags. Tell me, how did you come up with the idea?
And we came up with the idea, my sister and I, 6 years ago in 2013, sort of a combination of two things. The first was because we were born and raised on the island of Bali, and so nature was always a huge part of our upbringing, and we saw the negative effects that plastic was having on our environment. And we did a bit of research and we figured out that 40 countries around the world already took their stance against plastic pollution by banning single-use plastic bags. And so back then, in our simple minds, we were 10 and 12 years old, we thought, hey, if they're all doing it, come on Bali, we can do it too.
Right.
And so we started with just that simple idea and launched Bye Bye Plastic Bags, which today is an official NGO driven by young people on the island of Bali.
From an idea to a real impressive campaign, I'm sure there's a lot role that you have to walk together with your sister and your peers. What was it like to be at the very beginning?
At the very beginning, I think we sort of had an advantage because we were so young and young people, and so people could see that we really were doing this out of the pure intention of our hearts, not for some personal agenda or ego or money gains or anything like that. It was really to protect our island from plastic waste. And I think that was really, helpful in a sense, but I think at the beginning it was sometimes hard for people to take us seriously.
Yeah.
They were always like, oh, they're so cute, so inspirational. But I think after, people realized, we've been campaigning for 6 years. So they're like, okay, they are cute, they are inspirational, but they're serious too.
So how did you do your campaign?
We started off, 6 years ago with just 6 of our closest friends, I think, and we just started doing educational presentations to get the word out there that we wanted Bali to go plastic bag free.
Who were you talking to?
Mostly school children. We did school presentations to recruit new team members as well, just talking to them and saying, hey, do you want to be a part of this, and slowly expanding our team. And today we do, many different things to get our voices heard. We do government lobbying. We do, as I said before, educational presentations, social awareness campaigns. We have booths at markets. We speak at conferences. So a lot of things to really get our voices heard in the local community.
I always wondered, it's not just you, but also several other outstanding teenagers that really have been standing out about plastics and other environmental issues, climate change. and they're making such a big impact on awareness and advocacy. I really wonder, from your perspective, if you could do it within 6 years like this, what have the adults have been doing over the decades? I really wonder whether you thought about that question often or not. What's your conclusion?
I think, definitely like you said, the youth are rising everywhere around the world. I think for any issue that's out there, there's at least, I guarantee, one youth out there that has a solution and is trying to implement it somewhere. So definitely I think the youth, are very creative in their ways of overcoming these obstacles. But I think there's definitely a balance that needs to happen. There needs to be, regulations and policies implemented from the top down, but I think there also needs to be a sort of socialization and awareness working from the bottom up, right? It needs to be also a people's movement, and there needs to be a will from the people to change as well. So it definitely needs to have a balance to meet in the middle.
Is there a lot from the developing country, for example? Indonesia is a developing country. Of course, it's also a relatively bigger economy in the Asia-Pacific region. But is there strong will from common folks that you talk to about plastic bags? After all, it's cheaper, it's easier.
Yeah, I think one of the reasons people use plastic, for those two reasons, it's cheap and it's convenient, right? But I think when you're looking at Indonesia, the reason why it's such a big issue is because there's not enough education about it, right? So we would ask people, we go into classrooms and say, hey, are plastic bags good or bad? And the kids would raise their hand and say, good, good, good. I get it for free. I go home, it's easy to carry. I go home, I burn it, and it's gone. It's not my problem anymore. And we ask them, but if you burn it, it's bad. It's bad for the environment, right? And they had no idea. And so I think in these developing countries, there's definitely not a lack of caring, but a lack of education. Because the moment the kids realized plastic was having negative effects on the environment, they were like, okay, how can I become part of the solution?
Right.
What can I change in my daily life to not be a part of the problem anymore?
But then you have to provide an alternative.
We're saying bye-bye to plastic bags, but we also have to say hello to alternative bags, right? And I think also, having said that, it's 2019, right? The solutions, the creativity, and the innovation is there. I think the solutions are just around the corner.
Around the corner of what?
Well, I mean, we see already, there are solutions like organic solutions, like going back to wrapping everything in banana leaves or bamboo woven baskets like we used to do in traditional Bali, or even, alternative bags or reusable bags that you can use more than once.
Right.
Cotton bags, even your school bag. I mean, if you go to this shop after school to buy a snack, there's probably space in there to put your snack, right?
But
you don't need that plastic bag.
Industry is one thing that's very hard to handle. There is a whole industry based on producing plastic bags, processing plastic bags, and selling plastic bags.
Yeah.
So what about that part of the issue?
I think that's, again, where young people have a very interesting view on it, and we don't see it as a burden anymore, but more as an opportunity that there's this whole other industry that can be accessed for alternatives.
Give us an example.
I mean, definitely we're seeing so many young, cool Indonesian people coming up with solutions like making plastic alternatives from seaweed or cassava or banana peels. All these, very cool, interesting alternatives.
What do you make of the debate still going on about climate change and certain issues about environmental protection after decades of that in the world and among the policymakers? For a teenager, your future is about the choices that they are trying to make right now. What do you make of that?
Well, I don't think there really is a debate anymore with climate change, I don't think there should be one anymore. We're seeing the facts, we're seeing the results already happen. In Bali alone, we don't have 4 seasons, but we have 2 seasons. It's always been that way. But the rainy season is getting shorter and shorter and pushed back every year, while the dry season is getting hotter. We're seeing king tidal waves happening, sea levels rising already. So climate change is really staring at us in the face. And I think when it comes to, these decision-making conferences and meetings that are taking place, once again, consider all the stakeholders, the youth included. Because I think we look at things with such an urgency, right? We realize that we don't have the luxury of time to wait anymore. We can't wait 10 years down the line to, okay, maybe we can find a solution then to fix climate change or whatever. It has to be now. It has to be yesterday, really. So we look at things with a certain urgency that we just have to go and do things, and a real motivation and passion to create those solutions.
Isabel, there are a lot of young people around the world that are passionate about issues, but which issue to choose and how to concentrate on it.
Yeah.
What is the way to communicate with different kinds of players and factors? That is the key. I guess you've been, after 6 years of doing this campaign, have a lot of thoughts about that. What is the best way to understand the best campaign that one should take, and take it in a way civilized, while at the same time be able to push the agenda forward, once again, in a civilized way?
There's so many issues around the world, and it's sometimes, overwhelming to look at them all and be like, okay, can I really make a difference as one person? But I think how you can sort of find your passion personally is definitely to go out there, explore, and do as many things as possible in the world until you find that one thing that sets your heart on fire.
Mm-hmm.
And I think one way that's really powerful to move forward, as you said, in a very diplomatic manner, in order to make change, in a bureaucratic system, but also, really have change, activism, work, is to work together and not point fingers. Definitely not blaming each other, because that's going to get us nowhere, right? It's a matter of really connecting the dots, building those bridges between the scientists, the government, the politicians, the industry, the private sector, and the young activists. It's a matter of bringing us all together, because we all have something unique to bring to the table. It's all a piece of the puzzle that we need to create this big 100% solution.
Have you been working with the Chinese young people?
We have, actually. I think we have a Bye-Bye Plastic Bags branch in Shanghai, which is really exciting. And I think they're still getting started, they're still developing. But yeah, I think it's definitely, there's so many young Chinese people, so it would be incredible to start working with them more.
Isabel, what a pleasure finally meeting you. And all the best to the Bye-Bye Plastic Bags around the world, and certainly your new platform. Thank you so much. All the best.
Thank you.
Now we turn to Mary Ng, Canada's Minister of Small Business and Export Promotion, to discuss Canada's ambitious goal to abolish one-use plastics by the year 2021. Canada was formerly one of the biggest exporters of plastic garbage all over the world, with less than 10% of plastics in the country getting recycled. Now, Canada follows Europe in banning single-use plastics. The minister explains how Canada will reach these targets and what does that mean for small and medium-sized enterprises. 2021, that's the year Canada already decided to ban the so-called single-use plastics. So how you're going to do it, and how was the debate like in your country before that decision was reached?
Our government was elected, on a commitment to deal with climate change and to deal with the environment. So we have made a commitment absolutely towards climate change, and we believe that the environment and the economy can go hand in hand. So banning single-use plastics is the right thing to do. It is in addition to some of the other initiatives that we have also done as well, which is also limiting microbeads in cosmetic products. We've also contributed $100 million to developing countries, so that developing countries, we can work with developing countries in dealing with plastics, in their countries as well.
But talking about your expertise, which is about small and medium-sized enterprises, how to make sure they're going to grasp this opportunity rather looking at it as a challenge?
Across the country, we are seeing these great innovations or companies that are actually looking at this solution from a business perspective. So when there is an economic trigger, if you will, which is a business that can derive from this particular issue, which is to solve the issues around the environment, we are seeing these innovations come through. Another company that in Atlantic Canada has just built a housing structure made out of plastics. So again, it's about the circular economy is something that we are seeing emerging not only in Canada but literally around the world. Canada is hosting a circular economic conference in 2020. We're going to bring the world together in Canada to look at how these innovations can in fact take hold and help the environment, but at the same time create real viable economic opportunities for these companies in Canada and abroad.
even though it is not your job to talk about climate change, but I have to ask you that question, Madam Minister, because it's relevant here, that we see different governments have very different ideas and attitudes toward the climate change issue and the environmental protection. But the public is certainly extremely aware of it, and also, as you said, grassroots even pushing for more change on the hierarchy. So what do you consider as the driving force here when we are stepping into the next stage of working together for the climate change issue?
And we do believe that the environment and the economy can go hand in hand. So I work very closely with, with my colleague. So whether it is providing incentives so that small businesses can take their own climate action, by providing them with incentives for retrofits or, or taking other actions to reduce their consumption or their carbon footprint. That is something that we're doing, incenting businesses to grow, clean tech businesses to grow, putting a price on pollution, because we know that when there's an economic trigger, it creates changes in behavior. So it is a collaborative effort. It's going to take all of us. It's going to take government taking its action. It's going to take the stimulus of innovation and new startups growing in this field. But it's also going to mean collaborating with corporations who actually are also looking at solutions to deal with the environment, because I think everyone is recognizing that this is something we need to take collective action on.
Madam Minister, you see the global debates going on a daily basis these days, whether it's about geopolitics or this rule of the trade. Climate change, however, seems to be a topic that almost everyone sign up. I use the word almost, you know exactly what I meant. So will that become a common consensus in which the countries and economies will be able to work together so that they create more trust and create more mutual understanding, and therefore they could also be able to see that, in a way, spreading to the other areas of controversy, to say the least, for now?
Well, I would like to say that it would be the aspiration to do that. The air has no borders. The ocean has no borders, and I do think that the more opportunity we have to work together collaboratively between countries is something that is really an opportunity. And I always think that if you are able to collaborate in one area and be successful at it, you might be able to collaborate in other areas too.
Talking about your area, small and medium-sized enterprises, you heard so much discussions about that. And at the very beginning of the opening ceremony, you also heard people talking about the importance of S&M in terms of bringing momentum and vitality to the economies around the world. What do you make of the next stage for the small and medium-sized enterprises, given the unpredictability and uncertainties that we see today in a bigger environment?
Creating a competitive environment so that they, through the tax cut, actually will have reinvestment dollars into their business. Creating an environment where we are sensitive to regulations. We have really strong regulations around safety, food safety, for example, which actually makes the Canada brand really strong in the world marketplace. But we also have to be sensitive that we are looking at regulations so that they are not creating a burden for businesses to operate in. These are some of the things that we are doing to make sure that we have the right environment, a competitive environment for our small businesses to succeed in. But we're also focused on diversification of trade for our small businesses. So Canada's small businesses, we want to see them flourishing, not only growing in Canada, but giving them the tools so that they can become even more export ready to take advantage of the trade agreements that we've negotiated so that they can access the customers in the global marketplace, and that we, as a government, are providing the right incentives and the right supports so that our businesses can be more ready to grow and grow into the global marketplace.
Now, we turn to Chinese sci-fi writer Chen Qiufan, who uses stories to raise awareness of the plight of our planet. Chen's debut work, The Waste Tide, took aim at the global garbage import and export cycle. Chen skillfully uses his prose to illustrate real-world problems. Chen proves once again that the pen is mightier than the sword, even when it comes to environmental issues. It's a book about your experiences as to how China is dealing with the e-waste.
Yes, actually it was something happened back in my hometown, so it was like back in Shantou 6 years ago. Yeah, Guangdong province. It's basically a small town called Guiyu. It's like 60 kilometers away from the city where I was born, so 1 hour's drive. It used to be the center of the world electronic waste recycling center. So totally, you couldn't imagine what the scene there was like.
What do you mean by it used to be the center of the world's e-waste recycling?
Actually, like millions of tons of e-waste were shipped in an illegal way from like Western countries like America and like EU countries to Hong Kong and shipped to Guiyu town.
I see.
So it's basically making the whole economic running there. So all these immigrant workers, they're using their bare hand, their bare nose to detect and to categorize all this electronic waste, and using the acid, the hot pot, we can call it hot pot, to melt down, disassembling all these electronic devices into metals and to some other valuable materials.
So they mainly disassemble and also throw them into different categories of raw materials.
Yes. All this wastewater, the acid, the polluted air was totally damaged the environment. So
of this town.
So the local people might move away from this town. They live to the bigger town or bigger city. So left all this mess in the town. So that was back in 6 years ago. But before that, the government started to build up some more green, more efficient recycling park. So it was put into use at the very beginning of 2018. So right now, the whole environment gets better.
So with all of these changes, what does it mean for the lives of the people there in this small town?
From the news, I can read a lot of local people and those workers are concerned and worried about their income might shrinking because the government banned all these like 24 types of foreign waste, including e-waste. So I think it's kind of dilemma. So people might need to take a while to get over it.
Of course, I understand this is a fiction book, and yet many of the stories you wrote about mainly based on people that you really met in that small town. So tell us 1 or 2 examples of these people that you met, who they are, how they've been living, and what they are looking for.
For example, the main characters in this book, Mimi, she's a waste worker. She moved from like a Sichuan province. She tried to make a living from doing this waste categorizing and recycling work. But she's suffering all this daily job because she has to smell all this plastic, all this like motherboard was burned and decide what kind of material it is from this smell.
I see. Oh, she literally had to do that.
Yes. So it's totally damaged her health and also her mental health because she was treated as a waste. She was named like waste worker or waste people. So in this book, she became the key person who turned over the whole environment.
How did she do that?
With the help of technology. Actually, she was infected by some virus within this electronic waste, and she became some post-human, like can connect the human consciousness with machine.
Right, this is the science fiction part, of course.
Yes, exactly. So she helped her people to see a broader view, to fight against the foreign company who try to have some kind of conspiracy within this small town.
Right.
So I try to bring in all these levels of conflicts together, and they are not just black or white characters. They are all in a gray zone. No one is like purely evil or good. Everyone is the consequence of their own history and cultural background.
People could well understand, as a science fiction writer, you want to create the drama as much as possible in the work. That's why you create a situation in which China vis-a-vis the United States, apparently. But some would also accuse you of trying to prop up this nationalistic debate, whether in China or beyond. What do you think?
Yeah, to me, on this book, it is strong conflict, maybe like direct conflict between two countries. But maybe in my next book, we will all together, like China and America, like facing the same enemy, maybe from outer space, maybe from artificial intelligence, maybe from the environmental disasters. So I totally believe in human destiny community. So we are sharing the same planet, we're sharing the same home. We have to work together, or else we have no way to go.
If you think about this book, it's very different from the earlier science fictions you've been writing. And by the way, this book has been translated by Ken Liu, who is a very well-known translator trying to bridge Chinese science fiction with the rest of the world. If you look at Liu Cixin's Three Bodies, of course, that was translated by Ken Liu as well and won the biggest award. But, you know, put that aside, I mean, it seems that you're trying to do a very different story. You try to combine the realities of China and the struggle it has as a developing country with a science fiction style. How does that work, and why is it important for you?
I think to me, like science fiction is always important to play a role in raising the problem, to asking the right question, the critical questions. So it's not like finding a solution, even in an imaginary way. So like in this book, I bring up a style, I call it sci-fi realism. So it's like a combination.
Yes.
So I put in maybe the real location, the real scenarios, with some fictional people, characters, and storylines. So because I think it's a strong metaphor. This disaster not only happened in China, not only this era, but everywhere, like worldwide. So it has to reflect some like human condition in a broader way. So everyone should be connected and related to this book. So that's why I put it into a science fiction.
Before we go, Fan, we talked about this before, whether technology is the way and the solution. I still remember your answer, but I do want to ask you once again, because now it seems that since our last conversation, we're even at a more complex situation.
Yes.
So what is the role of technology really? And how do you, as a science fictional writer, be able to help to your utmost role to find the solutions to some of the most complicated things that we're facing right now? It seems that people are feeling helpless and restless as a result of this.
Yes, I think we always say that technology is a sword. Like if you put into good hands, it can be a benefit for most people, but if it was put into like some evil hands, it will be like disaster. To me, it's always strong connection to humanity. So if you don't have a profound understanding of humanity, you couldn't make good use of technology because it could be abused. So you have to be connected to people. You should value each individual. So what's their perspective? What's their emotion? What's their background?
As a result, you know your hometown much better.
Yes, exactly. Because when you were a kid, you try to escape from your hometown, for sure. That's why I go to Beijing and go to the university. But when you grow up, you will realize that there's some connection. Your roots was in your hometown.
Some part of you is there.
Yes, in your blood. So you have to go back. You have to rediscover the whole tradition, all your people, all your culture, even all your language.
And now you know yourself probably even better.
Yes.
You're watching World Insight with me, Tian Wei. Still to come on our program. While China has its fair share of environmental challenges, we discuss China's pivotal role in halting the global pollution crisis. Welcome back. You're still watching World Insight with me, Tian Wei. The program is coming to you on CGTN. China sits at the crossroads, having developed exponentially after 40 years of opening up. China must now reconcile that economic development came with a cost. China's next stage of development can be fueled by green technology. With the U.S. withdrawal from the Paris Climate Accord, China, though, has the opportunity to become a leader and a partner in sustainable economic development. Can the country act as a role model for emerging nations who want to leapfrog the worst excesses of industrialization? Let's find out. For more, join us in our Beijing studio, Ma Jun, who is the director of the Institute for Public and Environmental Affairs and also founder of the Blue Map app in China. Also joining us in Beijing, Zhang Jianyu, Chief Representative of Environmental Defense Fund China Program. Gentlemen, welcome to our program. Long time no see, but I'm looking forward to this discussion. Earlier you see in our program, banning plastic bags by young people in Indonesia, and that campaign spread around the world. Talking about the transition of economy and creating job opportunities for small enterprises in Canada as a result of dealing with waste and plastics. Now, what is China doing here, Mr. Ma?
I think China has been working on the garbage issue at this moment. I think plastic is an important part of that. We have just seen Shanghai, taking the lead to initiate the first mandatory garbage sorting program.
Yes. And created quite a stir on social media.
All kind of social media craze. But I think this is the first serious action taken in China to try to really initiate the garbage sorting, which has been initiated first 20 years ago, but without much progress at all. This time it's getting quite serious.
Mr. Zhang, though, is China and the rest of the world taking different ways? I mean, if you look at banning plastic bags in African countries, Indonesian girl doing their campaign now to use plastic bags, others talking about single use already banned by year 2021 in Canada, for example. China did not mention too much in the so-called plastic bag issue, but rather looking at the bigger issue of how to treat with waste. Are these two different approaches?
Well, waste. I think China, I don't see that much difference in terms of the approaches different countries has been taking. If you recall, actually, China launched this campaign banning plastic bag almost 10 years ago by the NDRC. I mean, successful or not, we can judge. But I think now
that's important. Was successful or not?
Well, to a certain degree, is successful, because if you go to any of the grocery stores, I think these days you actually need to pay if you want to get a bag. I think the economy really works there, because if you want to pay, then lots of people start to use reuse bags rather than to buy those plastic bags on site.
Right.
But I think the most recent news is quite encouraging, because I think finally we're taking a systematic approach to the waste issues. I think really starting from, there's a really important revision of our solid waste law right now is at the NPC, National People's Congress, right now.
But when is it likely to come out, and how is it related to the recent issue going on in Shanghai about how to deal with the waste from the common people's perspective?
Well, I think it's going through the revision right now. I think we're really expecting that very soon. Minister Li Ganjie from the Ministry of Ecology and Environment made a personal testimony there and pledged for the passing of the law to the legislators. And I think Shanghai is just really setting up a very good precedent in terms of what they're doing.
Right.
And I think every province in China are looking to Shanghai to see and hope they could be successful.
But you know, think about that, Mr. Ma. It's not just advocacy, because what Shanghai is doing is certainly a great advocacy, a great case study, but also education for the public. For example, what kind of waste to be sorted out, in what category, what kind of waste belongs to what category, and how would from children till the senior age would all understand these concepts and do it rightly. Meanwhile, when the garbage companies collect them together, there's also going to be sorted out, not the common people making the effort, and eventually it didn't work. So, Mr. Ma, your take. Advocacy vis-a-vis education.
Yeah, I think it's, you know, I'm so happy to see this started from Shanghai, because Shanghai people have been known to be very meticulous, meticulous and very careful in their living. So when it got started there, they have been able to differentiate all these 30, 40 different kinds of all kind of waste and then categorize them.
Do you have prejudice against the people in Shanghai or bias?
No, this is I give credit for them to do this.
Exactly.
But in the meantime, you mentioned a very important point. I think the failure for the past 20 years in our garbage sorting program is that you educate people, but in the meantime, the collection, the transportation and disposal and recycling, all these are not following this. You know, people see some different, you know, some sorted out, but then you dump this all together. You know, this is very, very become a very big upset. But this time in Shanghai, I think they have made a difference. They have the other holistic approach. So the government decided to spend the real political capital on this.
A lot of political capital.
That's right.
You see the debates on the internet. Mr. Zhang, what about that? Advocacy vis-a-vis education and the building of the systematic or holistic approach, as Mr. Ma just mentioned. Is it going to be short term, or is it likely to be a long time task? Even if it is the latter, it takes much more than what's just going on right now on social media debate.
Well, I think China shortens everything. You know, arguably China has shortened the industrialization process from other countries have to do with about 100 years. China has shortened that into 30, 40 years. And I believe we're going to have the same success in garbage sorting. I think
if we really try.
Right. The issue is, this, again, I think I emphasize the systematic approach is really important, because if you think about the other issues we have been dealing with, air and water, mostly we use a iron hand coming from a top-down approach. But this garbage issue, you have to deal with the people, because people plays a really important role in this whole chain of garbage production, garbage use, garbage recycling, and garbage incineration and disposal. And I think it's the people's element that we really start to deal with. That actually represents really, I think, a revolutionary approach. The government is dealing with overall environmental issues.
The bottom-up approach rather than the top-down approach.
Right.
And you see that also being successful all over the world. That we mentioned earlier in our case study discussion about the bad bioplastic bags in Indonesia and also in Canada. But the question really is, for China, it's a huge country, Mr. Zhang, one has to admit. 1.4 billion people. This bottom-up approach, yes, could be successful in certain cities, such as the favorite city of Mr. Ma, Shanghai. But will that be also successful in other parts of China, where the economies do not necessarily as developed as that in Shanghai?
Well, that's why I mentioned, I think this law is really important. I think law establish a common level playing field for everyone in this country you have to deal with. And Shanghai is just really making the first move. If they are successful, then that experience can be replicated throughout the country.
But we cannot just bury ourselves in the fascination about this garbage sort out, and therefore we're getting there, treating our environment beautifully. Because as far as I understand, Mr. Ma, we are having a daunting task. You are doing this, what you call the blue sky map, in a way. You're trying to sort out the companies that have been polluting air, water in this country and make sure their names are being exposed to the general public and the consumers. You got it over there. But the recent number, as far as I know, is not that optimistic.
That's right. You know, last week we just marked out our 1 million, milestone of the number of violators in our Blue Map database.
That is not a milestone. I'm afraid it's quite a tragedy, Mr.
But it shows
but I know you're an optimistic person.
That's the level of showing the level of enforcement and disclosure has been really expanded. And then, through this market approach, we're working with global and local brands, including Apple, Huawei, and others, to green their supply chain, and working with financial institutions to drive green finance. And together, every week now, they can motivate more than 100 factories to take corrective actions and openly address their violations. But now, I think it's very important to also work on the green consumption part. I think we can have green production, we can have green finance, green supply chain, which all pressure for green finance. But in the meantime, the power of the people is also very important. Because thinking about China as a growing middle class, their lifestyle is actually generating so much demand and creating so much waste. Now everyone order their food, order everything online. And just think about how much waste this is going to generate. But if they turn themselves into active citizens, they can drive positive change.
Mr. Zhang, you've been also working on the Green Belt and Road Initiative. That's also how China should and will interact with the rest of the world to bring in this green idea, as well as the issue related to climate change, environmental protection, to the countries with which China is working together with.
Yeah, I think, again, I think China is fast pacing with everything, also on the environmental movement. And I think lots of countries, particularly on the Belt and Road, are now looking for China experience, how China has been dealing with the issues. So it's no longer just the industrialization experience. They think the Chinese experience could be more applicable to their very unique country situation. So I think China really want to not only export the technologies, expertise, but also they want to export the environmental idea, the green idea, throughout the Belt and Road.
Of course, China had lessons before when it comes to environmental issues. It's time to learn the lessons, and it's also time to share about the best practices when they can.
Yeah, quite some of them are coming to us because they're very interested in China's monitoring technology and enforcement as new skills. So like Vietnam, like India, our colleagues have been invited to share some practice, not just lessons, but now also best practice.
Fascinating insights, I have to say. We'll have more opportunities in the near future to explore many of the case studies you talked about. Certainly very important to dig deeper into every of these issues we just mentioned. Thank you so much, Zhang Zhenyu and Ma Jun. Really appreciate it. Thank you so much, gentlemen, for joining us. And that is all the time we have for today. If you'd like to see more, try to find us World Insight CGTN into your search engine, or check out our YouTube channel. You can also follow us on Twitter, Facebook, and Sina Weibo. From me, Tian Wei, and everyone on the World Insight team, thanks for watching. Tune in again next time for more insights across China and around the world. Bye for now.